In 2000, the most successful coffee company in the world walked into Australia with near unlimited money, a globally proven business model, and the confidence that comes from dominating an entire industry. Within 8 years, they had lost over $100 million, closed more than 60 stores, and become one of the most embarrassing corporate failures in modern business history. And the craziest part is that the decision that destroyed them was not a mistake. It was a deliberate strategy that had worked everywhere else on the planet. This is the story of that decision and why it killed Starbucks in Australia. The empire. By the year 2000, Starbucks was untouchable. They had invented an entirely new category of business, the so-called third place between home and work, where people could sit, drink coffee, and feel like they belonged to something. Howard Schultz, the man who built Starbucks into a global empire, had turned a single store in Seattle's Pike Place market into a company with over 3,000 locations across a dozen countries. The stock price had skyrocketed. Analysts called it one of the greatest retail expansions in history. Starbucks did not just sell coffee. They sold an experience. The green siren logo, the handwritten names on cups, the ambient music, the comfortable chairs. It was a formula so powerful that people in dozens of countries were willing to pay 3 to 4 times more for a Starbucks coffee than for a regular cup. And the formula was simple. Find a high-traffic location, open a large, beautifully designed store, hire friendly staff, serve consistent products, and watch the money flow. It had worked in the United States. It had worked in Japan. It had worked in the United Kingdom. There was no reason to believe it would not work anywhere. Australia was the next logical target. It was a wealthy, urbanized, English-speaking country with a strong cafe culture. Australians drank more coffee per capita than Americans. The market was ripe. The population was concentrated in a few major cities, which made expansion efficient. On paper, Australia was the easiest decision Starbucks had ever made. The invasion in July 2000, Starbucks opened its first Australian store in Sydney's CBD. The reception was enthusiastic. Lines formed. The media covered it like a celebrity arrival. Australians were curious about this American coffee phenomenon they had heard so much about. Within 2 years, Starbucks had opened nearly 30 stores across Sydney and Melbourne. By 2008, they had 87 stores. The expansion was aggressive, funded by the company's massive war chest and driven by a simple belief: what works in America works everywhere. Here is the specific decision that doomed them. Starbucks chose to replicate their American model in Australia with almost zero adaptation. Same store design, same menu, dominated by sweet, milk-heavy drinks like frappuccinos and flavored lattes. Same pricing, which translated to very expensive coffee in Australian dollars. Same self-service counterculture, where you order, grab, and go. Same large format stores in high-rent locations. The entire strategy was built on the assumption that the Starbucks brand was so powerful it could transcend local culture. They were wrong. Spectacularly, expensively wrong. And the reason they were wrong had nothing to do with coffee and everything to do with the decision they made before they opened a single store. The decision not to understand who they were selling to. The culture. They didn't see what Starbucks did not understand, and what nobody in their Seattle headquarters bothered to investigate was that Australia already had a coffee culture that was older, deeper, and more demanding than anything Starbucks had ever encountered. After World War II, hundreds of thousands of Italian and Greek immigrants settled in Australia, particularly in Melbourne and Sydney. They brought with them the European espresso tradition. Not the American version of espresso, diluted with milk and sugar and syrups, but the real thing. Small cups, intense flavor. Made by people who had been trained in the art of coffee since childhood. By the time Starbucks arrived in 2000, Australia had spent over 50 years developing one of the most sophisticated coffee cultures on the planet. Melbourne alone had thousands of independent cafes, many of them family-owned for generations. The baristas were not teenagers in green aprons following a corporate recipe. They were skilled professionals who understood coffee the way a sommelier understands wine. Australians had grown up drinking espresso, flat whites, and long blacks. They knew what good coffee tasted like, and Starbucks, by comparison, tasted like something designed for people who did not actually like coffee. The Frappuccino, Starbucks' best selling drink in America, became a symbol of everything wrong with their Australian operation. It was a dessert masquerading as coffee. It contained up to 500 calories and more sugar than a can of Coke. To an Australian, ordering a Frappuccino was not just a bad coffee choice, it was a cultural embarrassment. Australians saw Starbucks not as a premium coffee brand, but as a fast food chain selling sugary drinks to people who did not know any better. The brand that was a status symbol in America was a punchline in Australia. The collapse. By 2008, the losses were impossible to ignore. Starbucks Australia was burning through cash. Most of the 87 stores were unprofitable. The ones in tourist areas like the Sydney Opera House did okay, but the stores in real Australian neighborhoods, the suburbs where people actually lived and drank coffee every day, were empty. Australians were not avoiding Starbucks because they did not know about it. They were avoiding it because they had tried it and found it inferior to the independent cafe on the corner that charged less and served better coffee. In July 2008, Starbucks announced the closure of 61 of its 87 Australian stores. Over 600 employees lost their jobs. The financial losses were estimated at over $105 million. It was the largest single market failure in Starbucks history. Howard Schultz later admitted that the company had tried to do too much too fast in Australia, which was a polite way of saying they had walked into a market they did not understand, refused to adapt, and paid the price. But here is the part that matters for this channel. The failure was not caused by bad coffee, or bad locations, or bad timing. It was caused by a single decision. The decision to treat the Australian market as if it were just another America. The assumption that a proven model could be transplanted without modification. The belief that brand power alone could overcome a culture that had spent 50 years perfecting something Starbucks could not replicate with a corporate playbook. The lesson from Starbucks' failure in Australia is not that expansion is dangerous or that Australia is uniquely difficult. The lesson is about the danger of confusing confidence with understanding. Starbucks was confident because their model had worked everywhere else. But confidence based on past success is the most dangerous kind of confidence, because it blinds you to the ways the next situation might be different. The companies that succeed globally, whether it is McDonald's in India removing beef from the menu or Netflix adapting content for local markets, share one thing in common. They made the decision to understand before they made the decision to expand. Starbucks made the opposite choice. They decided first and understood never. That decision cost them over $100 million and a reputation that, in Australia, they have never fully recovered. The future isn't built in a single moment. It's built through decisions. Some good, some bad, some that changed the world. If you enjoyed this story, you'll enjoy the next one. Subscribe to the Decision Project and discover the decisions that shaped companies, countries, and lives.